Okay, round 5 of the 2026 NRL season is now in the books. Apologies for the late upload. I had to work my day job today on Easter Monday, so I caught up with the Eels Tigers game on catch up. Otherwise, I would have had the video up 3-4 hours ago. But what a round of rugby league over the Easter weekend. I hope everyone had a good Easter. Let's dive in. There's some really interesting scores, and there are some teams in serious trouble. Some teams you wouldn't expect to be in trouble, but there are some teams that are in trouble. So we start with the Dolphins Sea Eagles. Obviously, Anthony Seibold got the sack. Kieran Foran is in his interim, and the Sea Eagles have responded with a thumping win over the Dolphins, 52 points to 18 at KO Stadium in Redcliffe. I mean, the Seibold sacking has all the mirrors of what happened at Brisbane back in 2020 with him. There has to be some blame put on the players. There has to be. Because they responded immediately to Kieran Foran's coaching, and Kieran Foran, this is his first coaching gig. He only retired as a player in November, and has only been an assistant for the best part of a month at the Sea Eagles. But they've responded to his basic instructions. They really blew the Dolphins out the water. Where has his performance been to start the season? So there'll be questions about the players' attitude towards Anthony Seibold, and also questions about Anthony Seibold's methods. There's been reports coming out the Sea Eagles for some time that the playing group was divided over his coaching methods and not all the squad had bought in. Hopefully Kieran Foran can unite that squad and they can build some momentum off this. So that was a key win for them, otherwise they would have been at the bottom of the ladder. The Dolphins, there are some concerns there. Their attack isn't quite clicking, but defensively there are some serious issues with the Dolphins. They've had a very mixed, indifferent start to the season, but they need that attack to click and they need to tighten up defensively. And, you know, I think there is some pressure on the coach. I think there's definitely pressure on the coaching staff at the Dolphins now. They've got a good squad, they've got a talented squad, they've got some really talented players, but they are missing some through injury, but they've got the majority of their players fit. So this is a bit of a concern for the Dolphins. I mean, they had a brilliant attack last year. Defence is still an issue, and it's a big problem. They're misfiring in attack, and their defence is like a sieve. They've got one of the weaker defences to start the season, and they are in trouble. They're 2-3, mixed start to the season. There needs to be some sort of defensive improvement. Otherwise, this could be a long season for the Dolphins. Much is expected of them to kick on. They've now established themselves in the league. They're building something. They got close the last couple of seasons to the top 8. Their defence has let them down again. But the Sea Eagles, what a response. Let's see if they can continue that momentum under Kieran Foran and actually start building something. Because they have a talented squad with some of the young players there and some of the talented players they have there. It's just that they haven't been performing. Did they down tools? We shall see. The Bunnies, Bulldogs, what a game that was. That finished 32-24 to the Bunnies. The Bulldogs have now lost 2 in a row. And there's question marks again over Burton and Galvin and Crichton and who should be in the halves and how the spine is operating. And defensively, they've been a bit more frail in recent weeks. And defence is what they built their game around, what they build their game around. They had the best defence last year. They've looked a little bit suspect defensively, but you expect a few wobbles along the way for any good side. I think the Bulldogs have enough to be a top 4 side. They need to figure out the halves, really. I don't think it's working with Burton in there. Do you move Burton into the centres? Do you move Hayward into the halves because he is traditionally a half? Galvin, do you just try and tell him to keep it simple? And it's a complicated one. The Bunnies, however, they've had a resurgence under Wayne Bennett. They've got a fitter squad this year, so their key players are fit, which is key. They've been beset by injuries for several seasons. They're finally keeping their players fit, which is important. There's still issues with the temperament of Cody Walker and Latrell Mitchell. They're still forcing the play occasionally and making silly errors, which could undo them against better, more informed sides. The Bulldogs, as I say, have had a bit of a wobble the last few weeks. And the Bulldogs' attack is not where other top 4 or top 8 sides' attacks sort of are at this point. But it's still reasonably early in the season and combinations will still take time to fully bed in. But I think they made a mistake letting Toby Sexton go. I think there was definitely a better combination with Burton and Sexton before Galvin joined. I think that still has disrupted the Bulldogs' flow and potentially the locker room with how that was all handled. And I still think there's a carryover from that. The Bunnies side of things, the fact that they're mostly fit, there's a couple of players out injured, but they're mostly fit and firing is a good sign. And it's just, keeping the Bunnies consistent, because they still have some warning signs that they're not quite where they need to be. But that was a really important win for the Bunnies in front of a big crowd at Accor Stadium. The biggest surprise of the weekend is the Panthers putting 50 past the Melbourne Storm. 50 points to 10. The Storm are in trouble. The Panthers are just a well-oiled machine. That is probably the best Panthers performance I've seen in 6, even 7 years, even during their dominant 4 premierships. That is the worst Storm performance I have seen for the best part of nearly 20 years. I've been watching rugby league since I've been 3-4 years old. That is the worst Storm performance I've ever seen. Now, yes, Kamikamica's obviously had his stroke, and that is deeply concerning, and we wish him well. And obviously, Eli Katoa may never play again, so they're missing some key forwards, but the same basic principles are there. The Craig Bellamy system is there. But how many blow-ups can players take from Craig Bellamy? I mean, there's a point where that style of coaching wears thin. The majority of the spine is the same as last season. Munster, Jerome Hughes, Harry Grant, they're your leaders. They're not leading at the moment. They're making very silly errors in possession, and defensively their systems have completely collapsed. Something is going wrong at the Storm, and I've been saying this for a couple of seasons. There are some warning signs, there are some vulnerabilities. Now, yes, they've made the last 2 grand finals, but no team has lost 2 grand finals and then made a 3rd in a row. That has never happened. There are some severe warning signs here with the Storm. There were some issues last season and the season prior. Second half performances haven't been great. They haven't been able to sustain a full 80 minutes in key games. That is a real big war. They are in trouble. There's no doubts about it. They are in trouble. Worst Storm performance I think I've ever seen. And there were periods when Craig Bellamy first took over. There was a couple of seasons where they were an average team. The season after the salary cap breach, where they weren't allowed to make finals, but since Craig Bellamy's been there, they have consistently been a top 8 side. They have made so many grand finals, won grand finals. Something is very wrong with the Storm at the moment, and could you put that down to Eli Katoa and Kamikamica with their health issues? You would think the players would rally around and try and win for them. So something is going on there, and you could argue they've let some good depth players like Grant Anderson, Garlick, for example. These are your squad guys, these are your glue guys, these are your hard workers who fill in and do the hard graft, and the energy guys around a team. I think the players they've let go and not adequately replaced is also a warning sign as well. And then you have to look at things and go, something's wrong and off there. Another team in serious trouble is the Dragons. They were battered by the Cowboys 32 points to 0. It could and should have been more. That's what's terrifying, is they should have shipped 50. That Dragons performance was the worst performance of the weekend. There was no fight there. You've got to feel for Shane Flanagan. He's a very good coach. He's a premiership winning coach. Even with some of the issues he had at the Sharks and his time out of the game as a coach, the Dragons are in serious trouble. Whether Shane Flanagan keeps his job is another thing. He looked like Craig Bellamy looked broken in their defeat. Shane Flanagan looked very broken after that performance, and I don't know how much longer this can continue for Dragons fans. That this is their worst start to a season since St George and Illawarra merged. They've never been this bad to start a season. They've had some average teams, but they are in serious trouble, and I don't know where they go from here. And people are saying, it's Carl Flanagan's one of the problems. He didn't play in this game and they got worse. And he takes a lot of flack in the media, on social media. Something's very off with the Dragons completely. The first 4 rounds, you could see they were fighting, they were scrapping. There was no fight, absolutely no fight. This team looked broken. The morale's gone. Shane Flanagan, he said it in the press conference, if I could sack all 17 of them, I would. He's not happy with the performance, but they're getting worse. So I don't know where the Dragons go from here. They're in serious trouble. The Cowboys have really responded to a poor start to the season after the first 2 rounds. They're now getting some momentum, getting some confidence, and their skill players, Purdue, he's having fun. He's really enjoying that centre role, even though he's predominantly a half or a fullback. He's really enjoying his role in the centres. They've got pace in the outside backs. They've got Labour who can come off the bench. They have Chester as the other centre, so you've got options in the outside backs. The halves are starting to pick up their form. The forward pack, even Tamalolo, after 17 years in the league, is putting in some of the best performances he's ever put in. They are really showing some fight. They're fighting for the coach, they're playing for the coach, and they're building some momentum. They look really good. They're a dark horse, I think, to go on a bit of a run. The Cowboys are a team in form. Titans, Broncos, it was great to see Seabus Super Stadium as a sellout. The atmosphere in that stadium, because of the construction of it, I wish they had more sellouts, because that was a cauldron. It was a really good crowd, good atmosphere. The Broncos win 26 points to 12. The Titans, look, they are not a top 8 side at this point. Josh Hannay, I think, is going to be given time to implement his ideas. The board and the ownership need to be patient. They've got some good young players. They've got a good, talented squad that is developing. The Broncos have responded to their poor start to the season as well, very similar to the Cowboys. They built a little bit of momentum. However, injuries, I think, are going to undo the Broncos. There's some concerns about several players. Adam Reynolds, for example, Ben Hunt, Reece Walsh. There's some concerns coming out of that game. There's been some player discipline off the field, and it was a player-led thing to say, no, we're not accepting this, we're going to improve the culture, which is important. There's been criticism of Michael Maguire, but since those negative headlines in the Ben Teo departure, they've responded really well. Their defence has improved, so there was clearly dysfunction there in the coach's side of things. Suddenly that's been put to bed. They're performing. They're fighting and scrapping. But last season they were a little bit indifferent like this. It wasn't the best Broncos performance. In fact, that wasn't the best game of the weekend. A lot of errors in there. I think the Broncos are going to see some tougher tests against other opposition. They need to. There's still room for improvement. The Sharks Warriors. The Sharks 36 points to 22 over the Warriors at home. The Sharks in previous seasons have failed to beat other competing sides in the top 4. Now the Warriors were in the top 4 last season. That's a good win for the Sharks. They've had a few issues against beating sides above them in the top 4 or top 5, top 6. That was a statement win from the Sharks. The Warriors, like the Bulldogs, have had a little bit of a wobble, and it's been since Metcalf's come back into the side. Tanner Boyd seems more confident and more competent and more relaxed without Metcalf there. I think that's disrupted the flow of things, because he was the man in charge and he was playing the best he's ever played. I think Tanner Boyd is a very talented player. He's a confidence player, and I think that change in the combination, he looks better with Harris Tavita, really. So I think Andrew Webster's got a few decisions to make with his combinations. You've got to keep Tanner Boyd in there. They look better with him in the side. Harris DeVito, I think, needs to have a role in this team. They look better when he's part of the spine, be it emergency fullback, hooker, in the halves. They look better with Harris DeVito in the side than Metcalf. I think Metcalf coming back early from injury has disrupted the flow. Tanner Boyd would have spent a lot of time working with Harris DeVito in the combinations in the pre-season, knowing that Metcalf wasn't fully fit. They've wobbled since he's been back in, but the Warriors are still a good side. The Sharks, though, are building some momentum as well. They've had a few wobbles in there, but they're starting to actually build some momentum, similar to the Cowboys. Poor start of the season, they're building, and I like what the Sharks have been doing lately. They can play, and their outside backs are very entertaining when they ball in hand. Their forward pack can get them up the field, and Nico Hines, when there's a bit less pressure and they're a bit more dominant and the go forward, he's looking more confident this season, which is really important for them. Knights Raiders. As a Raiders fan, I'm now deeply concerned. Long four losses in a row, long winless streak. The Knights 32-12, and they're missing key players: Dylan Brown, Kalen Ponga. They look better without Ponga in the side. Fletcher Hunt looks a different type of fullback. Fletcher Sharp, if he can stay fit, that knee injury, he's going to have to manage that. But they look better with those two in the side. Dylan Brown, obviously, I think they look good with him in the side as well. But Kalen Ponga, I'm not sure with the exciting players they've got, if he actually works in this spine. They look better without him. And I'm being honest, they actually look better without Kalen Ponga in the side. Just honest opinion. And they're building something at the Knights. They are really building something. Raiders, I'm really concerned now as a Raiders fan. A lot of silly errors. The discipline's been poor. Look, young, talented players did really well last season, but Jamal Fogarty's a big loss. They've lost that calming influence. Ethan Strange is still developing his game. Ethan Sanders, I don't think is fully ready for first grade at this point. there's a lack of control there. Ethan Strange is very, very good. He's had several seasons now. Ethan Sanders hasn't had enough time. I'm a bit concerned there. And then the handling errors, the discipline. Not they're losing their discipline, and this is where the senior players need to start leading. Papali and Tarpany, for example, they need to start calming things down and getting some of these young firebrand players to just tone it down a little bit, try and keep their heads disciplined. They're making some really silly errors, not respecting the ball, and they're 1-4 as a result. And as a Raiders fan, that's concerning. They showed a lot of promise and development last year. I think they overachieved a little bit, but I didn't expect this much drop off so quickly. And so there will be pressure on them to turn things around. Young team, can they deal with this poor run of form? Because they're exciting to watch, but it is concerning with the four straight losses, so they're in trouble. Eels Tigers. This is, I think, the best game of the weekend. Absolutely fantastic seesaw battle. Tigers win it in Golden Point. Jock Madden. How do you drop him? Because he's Jerome Luai is going to have some challenge for his spot. Adam Dewey's been brilliant. I think that combination works really well. How do you drop Jock Madden? It's like Tanner Boyd. How do you drop these players that weren't expected to be the starting 6 or 7 in their respective teams? How do you drop them? How they're in form, and the Tigers are playing really well. Last year they would have lost that game. The year before they would have lost that game. They're winning games that they were losing before, and you can definitely. They're second on the ladder. I mean, if you were a betting man, you would have cashed out now. But they are one of the informed teams at the moment. They're really entertaining to watch. The Eels, they're also entertaining to watch. This was a brilliant end-to-end game. Eels were up 10-0. Tigers come back. Now, couple of injuries. Simonson, that's season over. That is a really nasty broken ankle. There's no hiding from that. That is not a pleasant. The replay was grim. And then, their entire right edge went off injured, and they got the young rookie on the wing scores 2 tries, and that's brilliant. But they've got some injuries going into the following rounds now. That especially Simonson. That's the Tigers winger. Okay, he makes contact in the air. I don't think he intended for that to happen. I think that is an accident. The landing is awkward. At first you think it's a knee or a sprained ankle, a turned ankle, but then you actually see you see it, and it wasn't pleasant. Lengthy treatment, left on the Medicab. The atmosphere then bubbled over a little bit. I think both sets of players sort of lost their cool a little bit. There were some flashpoints. Years past, that would have been a full-on punch-up. Obviously, the game has evolved, and players don't throw bombs anymore. Although sometimes I think they should allow the biff to be back. The NHL, ice hockey does it. But that was a pressure cooker of a match. Brilliant match. Great way to end the round. Save the best till last. Before the season started, people are going, these two sides ain't going to make the top 8. There's fight in both teams there. The Tigers really are the real deal this year. I think they were showing signs last year under Benji Marshall. They had some good moments under Benji Marshall last year. The improvement was there, and now they're realising that improvement with good recruitment. Kai Pearce-Paul's been a brilliant pickup. These young players, the outside backs, the lack of experience in a lot of them, they're stepping up. So they dealt with that pressure cooker environment. Yes, they went down to 12. They did concede a couple of tries. It goes to Golden Point. And then Parramatta had a complete brain fart at the end. Now, whether, with the charge down and all that, when the attempted drop goal from Jock Madden, we could argue just should the rule be changed or amended, interpreted differently. If they're offside, they're offside. And it was an easy 2-point slot. But Jock Madden wasn't missing anything kicking for goal today. Mitch Moses missed a few kicks today, and that's proven crucial. The Roosters had the bye, and I think the Roosters needed that bye. They've had some indifferent form to start the season. But there we go. Fantastic first 5 rounds of the season, first 6 weeks of the season, first month and a half. It's been absolutely fantastic, really entertaining. Absolutely fantastic to watch. But there are some teams in trouble, like the Storm, the Dragons, the Raiders. You know, the Titans are fighting, but they're not quite there yet to be a competitive as competitive as I think they could be. But all the teams that did really well in the pre-season challenge are really struggling. Let's be honest. I mean, the Titans and the Dragons and the Eels not so much, but I'm really surprised with the Storm's recent form and that performance against Penrith. They just were terrible, absolutely terrible, and that is a big shock to see how bad they're playing in the last month. Real surprised with the Storm after their opening round victory over the Eels. They have fallen off a cliff, and you know there's got to be some question marks about what's happening there and why they're performing so badly. But they're just not performing as what is expected. They've got a good system. They've got players slot into that system, and it's just not working. And I've never seen a Storm team not back up a defeat with a win or a better performance. Their performances are actually gradually getting worse. And that was a complete drop off the cliff. They are in serious trouble. I thought the Cowboys' defeat was bad that second half, but that performance against the Panthers was just woeful. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Please like and subscribe, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.